Well, on one level, his policies are going to be very unified for the Labour Party. He's got a unified economics team with him and John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, which is something Labour haven't had really since 1994. That doesn't mean that even though they're united, they've necessarily got a coherent strategy. Let's say take three elements of the strategy as far as we know it so far. One is an anti-austerity. He says we've got to build to get growth, not cut to get growth. Now, I think that's a false distinction for a start, but the real problem is that he thinks you'll get enormous results from slowing austerity. All the evidence since 2010 is that the effect of austerity on the UK economy has been reasonably small. Two other policies where it's actually probably even more problematic. One is this sense that there are hundreds of billions of pounds to be got from tax evadance, tax avoidance, and something called corporate welfare, which suggests that government policy is giving loads of money to companies. Now, that sort of money just simply isn't there. And finally, this is the quantitative easing for the people, which is a bit similar to that. It's about finding money out of nowhere, which can be used for good deeds, in Jeremy Corbyn's view, for building infrastructure projects. But if you think about it for a second, if we were in a slump, that might be a sensible policy to pursue. If we're in a reasonably buoyant time, which we are really in Britain now, then if you just throw money, and extra demand at an economy that can't produce all these extra things, what do you end up with? Inflation.
Well, I suppose the big question in the area of public policy, as in all areas for him, is can his deeply held ideological beliefs translate on the ground into the delivery of public policy? For example, he is very strongly opposed to the role of private companies in the National Health Service, but a third of all spending on community care now goes to private and voluntary organisations. So if you take them out of the equation, you're left with a huge capacity crunch. And the same applies to his stance on welfare. He is bitterly opposed to the welfare cuts that the coalition set in train and the Conservative-led government is continuing with. In fact, it was the galvanising moment in his campaign for the Labour leadership when he, alone of all the leadership candidates, came out and said that he wouldn't back the government over those welfare changes. But even though he's delivered some detail on how he would make up the shortfall, it's still unclear, looking ahead, how he can both keep the public finances sustainable and look after families in poverty. Perhaps that the equation there has not been fully worked out.
British politics has been turned upside down. I mean, only a decade or so ago we had the centrist Tony Blair winning election after election for the Labour Party. Now that party has elected the most radical hard left leader in its 115-year history. You could say that the Greek Syriza party has come to Britain and taken over the Labour Party, such as the left radicalism, the push for nationalisation, the pacifism, the anti-NATO, anti-EU posture taken by Jeremy Corbyn over past decades as a rebel Labour MP. I mean, one answer is that he's not going to get elected as Prime Minister. You cannot imagine Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. Another answer says he's part of the tide of populism of left and right that's been sweeping across Europe since the financial crash. And he's a measure of the disillusionment and the disenchantment of people across Europe with established politicians, much, some would say, as Donald Trump is in the US.